That will be a Friday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. We also want to let you know that this meeting is being live streamed. So on your end, please also click Got It so that we can enable live streaming across social media platforms. So as I was saying, KCPF will have a family symposium whose theme is protecting family values in changing times. And we want to encourage all of us to come for that particular symposium because it is part of contending for the next generation. We will also have a March for the Family on the 13th of May, which is the following day, from 8 a.m. to 12:30, and we'll be meeting at Moy Avenue Primary School. So we'll keep reminding you of these events, and we hope that you will participate. I can see messages are coming in. I can see some of you have written to me privately. We encourage you to write in the group. I can see Donald from Nairobi. He says individual attendance from a poster shared by Wamboye. That's me. I can see Christabel Hawker, psychologist, communication, and biblical sexuality coach. Thank you very much, Christabel. What about the rest of us? We'd like to know who's in the house. If you've just come in, we're encouraging us to just share our names and where we are coming from. Please, let's do that very quickly so that we can get on with the program. I can see Edwin Kiema in his own personal capacity. He's here. And then I can see we've got Reverend Dr. Jacob Kipchilis. He's a clinical manager of pediatrics, at the Eastern Dinari AIDS Relief Program, listening from Nairobi. Karibu, Dr. Jacob. We've got Steve Kiteto. He's a team leader at Badili Experience, and I'm sure many of you know the Badili Experience. He's the convener of the family committee at KCPF. And so the announcements that are made for the symposium and the march, he's our head behind that. We've got Kechi Aimba, founder and director, Pearls and Treasures Trust, Karibu. Audrey Whitehead, capacity as a mother. We celebrate all the mothers. Mothers, we need you in this conversation. Jonathan Jirangoma from SIM, Malawi. Welcome, Malawi. We welcome people from all over the country, all over Africa. Michael Njiru, Teens Pastor, KG Kikuyu. I can see Edwin Kiem has also posted Discipleship and Community Life Pastor at Collective Worship Kenya, Karibu. Elio Cheng, Kibra Church of Christ from the Masters Men Organization, Youth Coordinator, animator, and film producer. We've got Nancy Wanjiru from Sitam Thika Road, came from the poster that was shared. We've got Dr. Naitoren Thurima, biblical marriage and family therapist at I Belong Counseling. Alvin Wendwa, Nairobi Chapel, Ngong Road, Karibu Sana. We've got Ann Kioko, Citizen Go African Director. Ann Kioko, we celebrate your work. I'm sure many of you have signed petitions from Citizen Go, and that is the work of Ann Kioko. We celebrate your presence here, Ann. And then I can see we've got John Kihu, youth leader at PCA Blue Valley Embu. Simon Masai, associate staff, Focus, Kenya, joining from Machakos. I can see we've got Juliet Kathure, CU patron, PCA Karai Secondary School, listening on her way to Sitam FDC and a member of Sitam Kikuyu. Ishmael To, listening from Nakuru, serving in youth leadership at Africa Gospel Church, Olive. Kevin Yoga, wonderful help. This event has been made possible through this man. You may not see him, but behind the scenes, he is holding the event on his shoulders. He's the programs manager at the Kenya Christian Professional Forum. Stella, another mom, wonderful Stella, and we celebrate all the moms. And this month we're celebrating Mother's Day, so we appreciate all the moms who are here. We've got Caroline Mokaira, Youth Ministry, Nairobi Chapel, Ngong Road, James Buyuka, Associate, Kisii University, and Wallace Maina, and Wallace is the chair at NAYNET. I've got 1 more minute for introductions before we begin. So once the 1 minute is done, I will stop. Chege Wangondu, Nairobi Chapel, Ngong Road. I have seen many representations from Nairobi Chapel. Clara Wangoi, a parent, another mom of children aged 8, 17, 18, and 27. 4 children, wow, and quite a wide variety as far as age is concerned. Thank you very much. Thank you for all of you who have introduced yourself. We thank you all for making time to come. This is a conversation we want to keep having. And again, just like I said, we are all gearing up towards two major events. And these major events are by the Kenya Christian Professional Forum, KCPF, which is a family symposium that will be on Friday, the 12th of May. And it's going to be at Sitam Valley Road. That is going to be next week. And the charges are 2,000 shillings. So please set aside that money, because it's going to be a conference that will really impact you positively and prepare you to stand firm for your family. And then we'll also have the family march for the family the following day. So thank you all for coming. And I can see a few others have come. Pauline, a mom from California, welcome. Purity from Young Christian Workers at St. Monica Catholic Kitengela. Miriam, another mom. Faith Kimani, a healthcare professional and a mom. At this moment, I would like to introduce our panelists. We are going to have a panel discussion, and in attendance, we will have Charles Kanjama, an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. We'll have Antonina Achieng, the founder of Mzazi. We'll have Dr. Wahome Ngare, who is an obstetrician and gynecologist. And we'll also have Colette from the Kenya Christian Professional Forum. Charles Kanjama is on a tight schedule, and so we want to maximize his time here. And he will be leaving at some point, but we are confident that Colette Akwana will also come in and do a fantastic job. So I thank you all for coming. I would just like to ask our panelists to introduce themselves, tell us what they do, and then we'll get right into it. Perhaps let me start with Charles Kanjama. Karibu sana.
Good morning, Ernest, and thank you for facilitating this discussion, which is a great time for us to discuss matters of human sexuality. My name is Charles Kanjama. I'm an advocate of the High Court, means I work as a lawyer. I am managing partner in a law firm called Muma & Kanjama Advocate. That's what I do as my day job. In addition, I serve currently as the chair of Kenya Christian Professionals Forum, which is an organization that is committed to promote values of sanctity of life, promotion of family and family values, religious freedom, and good governance. I have been involved in policy, litigation in the courts, as well as engagement in lawmaking in areas to do with marriage, family, and protection of the family in general, including the question of LGBTQ ideology and agenda. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charles. Karibu sana. I would like to ask Colette Akwana to introduce herself.
Good morning, Ernest. Good morning, my co-panelists, and good morning to all the people who are watching and listening to us from wherever you are from. My name is Colette Akwana. I am an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. I'm currently practicing in the firm of CMS Daily Namda as a partner in the disputes department, which means I often go to court. There are lawyers who go to court and others who don't. I'm one of those who go to court. I'm a member of the Kenya Christian Lawyers Fellowship and a member of the Kenya Christian Professionals Forum. I keep saying that I am a creature of advocacy where right to family is concerned. As a wife, a mother, and a born-again Christian, this is my responsibility. I'm glad to be here.
Asante sana Colette, a creature of advocacy. What a way to put it. Amazing. We have Antonina Mutinda. Would you please introduce yourselves? Antonina, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry about that. Good morning, everyone. And I greet everyone who is participating in this conversation. My name is Antonina Achieng. I am a mother of 4 children that I had the grace of God to raise, 2 boys and 2 girls between the ages of 15 and 4 years, and 3 who went to be with the Lord, which is another story, but part of this sexual revolution. but I come in this conversation as a passionate witness of Jesus Christ, that he heals, he restores, and I'm very excited about this conversation. I am a member of the Kenya Christian Professionals Forum in the Religion Committee. I serve as a chaplain in Gurek Mixed School, which is a school that rescues children from the slums and those ones who have been expelled from other institutions, giving them a second chance to learning and a second chance to doing life differently. I'm also a missions pastor at Christ Covenant Church Africa. And this day I come in the capacity of the founder and executive director of Mzazi, which is a grassroots movement of parents and future parents having conversations about how do we explore solutions, meaningful solutions that can see as restoring family values and protecting the next generation of Jesus' disciples. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful, wonderful, absolutely wonderful, Antonina. Thank you for being here, and we thank you for all your active work in the field. And last but not least, we have Dr. Wahome Ngare. He's a man who's known to many, but I will still ask Daktari to introduce himself to our attendees.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Wahome Ngare. I'm a gynecologist by training. I am a member of the Kenya Christians Professionals Forum. I serve at the board. I am the immediate former convener of the Life Committee in KCPF. I'm the current chairman of the Kenya Catholic Doctors Association, and I'm here to contend for the faith. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wahome Ngare. And we will have this discussion on sexuality, especially angling towards the LGBTQ discussion, especially in light of the recent ruling that was done in our courts. And so as we begin, perhaps I'll start with you, Dr. Wahome Ngare. It may seem axiomatic, but let's not assume it. Would you please enlighten us what LGBTQ stands for? And the reason I ask you this is so that you could also enlighten us a bit on terms and just how to use certain language, even as we move on in our discussion moving forward, and even as we have these discussions out there with friends and family.
Thanks. It's a good place to start, because we have to be very careful when we are dealing with the world, that we are not of the world. And there is language that is developed by the world that is causing us a lot of confusion, to a point where our own are beginning to find difficulty in contending. Now, the LGBTQ basically stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer. Is a list of alphabets that describes gender identities and sexual orientation. Now, the term gender identity and sexual orientation were developed by a gentleman called John Money. And John Money is the first person to use gender to refer to human persons. Before that, gender referred to inanimate objects. We could say the land is female, the church is female. There were certain languages that would use like French, where inanimate objects would have male or female genders. So John Money is the first one who applied this to human beings. And he said that gender is now different from biological sex, that you can be different from what you were born. And he says gender then is fluid. It can change. It depends on how you identify yourself. So it brings in a very, is a theory that is completely contrary to what we believe as Christians. He's the same one who coined the term sexual orientation, which then means depending on who you feel attracted to, then you could identify yourself, kind of giving it personhood or identity. And it's a concept that he had an opportunity to try. He believed that if you were born a boy, depending on how you are raised within the first 3 years, you could actually be trained to become a girl. that you could actually raise a child to become a certain gender. He had an opportunity to try this in what is popularly known as the John and Joan case. And he had a set of twins presented to him who were both boys, and one had lost their penis during an operation that went wrong. And he convinced the parents that the one who had lost his penis could actually be brought up as a girl. They did some surgery to make them look like a girl in the areas of their genitals, then gave the child a girl's name and dressed them up as a girl. By the age of 8, his experiment had failed because there was no way the young man was going to develop female characteristics. So what John Money did is that he gave the young lady, the young boy, female hormones. So she developed breasts and long hair, and she actually looked like a girl, but she was very confused, and he felt something was wrong. And by the age of 15, he had suicidal tendencies, and the parents agreed to tell him the truth. And he changed his name to Rema. But unfortunately, by the age of 30, he had very many challenges with depression, and he died by suicide. Mm-hmm. And his brother, who had been involved in this saga from the beginning, also died by suicide. And their father, eventually blaming himself for the loss of the 2 children, also died by suicide. This is the broken ideology of John Money that is now being used to give those alphabets meaning and make them identities that people can then pick up. It is contrary to our faith, it is contrary to science, it is contrary to common sense. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr.
Homengare. And I'm sure the audience will know that L represents lesbians. These are women who are attracted to men. Gay, these are men who are sexually attracted to men. B, bisexual, these are both men and women who are attracted to both men and women. And then we've got T, which is transgender. And I think if I remember you very well in a session, Dr. Homengare, you described transgender as those who reject their biological gender. Is that correct? You have to be careful, because gender and sex don't mean the same thing according to John Money. So they reject their sex, their biological sex. They reject their biological sex. Thank you. All right. Asante sana, Dr. Homengare. And for that enlightening history, just concerning where the LGBTQ movement gets most of the ideology from, far beyond practice, just as far as language and the ideology is concerned. I would like to move to Charles Kanjama. And Charles, people would say that bedroom matters concerning sexuality are bedroom matters, and that the church should not be concerned about it. These are matters that are private. Why is KCPF, why is NAYNET, why are churches, why is the Association of Catholic Doctors coming together to speak against this thing? Recently, we saw bishops come together on the media. We also saw KCPF come on the media. Why are we concerned with people's private matters that do not concern the public?
That's a very good question you've asked. And I must say that in our advocacy and engagement on what we call harmful sexual ideology, we have found that that is the central idea that has been used to promote acceptance of LGBT in the culture, in the community, in our laws, and basically in our environment. This idea that what somebody does in private does not affect others is an idea that has a philosophical background. Again, just like Dr. Home, I'll take us back to the 19th century. Dr. Home took us back to John Money, early 20th century, or mid 20th century. I'll take you back to 19th century. There was a gentleman called John Stuart Mill. He was a British parliamentarian, and he was also a philosopher. His father was a philosopher as well. called Mill. So when you talk of John Stuart Mill, you have to add his two first names to distinguish him from his father. I think his father was called James Mill. And this John Stuart Mill wrote a publication called On Liberty in 1859. And the central idea of his publication was that the state has no business regulating matters that people do in private. So he came up with a definition of harm. According to him, you are only harmed, or the state has business regulating harm, when the harm is physical or direct. So it has to be something that you can see immediately. And when people are doing things on their own, leave them free to make the choices that they want to make. According to John Stuart Mill, whatever people do in private that doesn't cause harm to you physically or directly is not the business of the state to regulate. So this general theory of John Stuart Mill was taken up in the 20th century by a number of characters, one of whom was Professor H.L.A. Hart. Law students know this gentleman because he's one of the proponents of what is called legal positivism. And H.L.A. Hart said that we should be able to apply this reasoning of John Stuart Mill to the question of sexual orientation or sexual behavior, a same-sex sexual behavior. And the other gentleman who took up this same idea was a gentleman called Wolfenden. So in the mid-20th century, Lord Wolfenden in the United Kingdom was given a job of chairing a task force to determine whether the United Kingdom should decriminalize the laws that they had against homosexuality, homosexual behavior. And in the result, in the Wolfenden Committee report, they referred to John Stuart Mill, and they concluded that what people do in their bedrooms does not cause harm to anyone, and so the state should not bother with it. What you do in private between two consenting adults. According to John Stuart Mill, the moment someone is an adult, it's their business to do what they want. So I needed to give that introduction before I answer the question. First, because we need to be aware that for those in our midst, in our society who propose that idea, knowingly or unknowingly, they are actually just rehashing the philosophy of John Stuart Mill and Lord Wolfenden. And secondly, to demonstrate that philosophy and the arguments behind it have been proven false over the last 50 to 60 years. It is easy to demonstrate that what causes harm is not only, that is number one, what causes harm is not only physical harm. Harm comes in various kinds. Harm is not only immediate, but is also gradual harm. That's why, for example, we have laws against dumping, pollution, environmental laws, not because when I dump a piece of paper, I'll cause harm to someone else. One piece of paper will not cause harm. But the fact that different people keep doing it, the aggregation of those acts, they cause harm. If one person decides not to pay taxes, it is not physical harm to anyone else. And yet, the aggregation of several people not paying taxes, that indirect harm is something that society has to regulate. It's also been proven that, or demonstrably proven, that what people do in the bedroom does not start in the bedroom and does not end in the bedroom. And this happens to any kind of sexual activity, because you don't just find yourself in the bedroom, you start outside the bedroom. And so in the countries where you have LGBT accepted, the LGBT people start kind of like presenting themselves to the public. They start looking for partners. They start grooming even minors. They start insisting, don't discriminate. We want young children through education curriculum to know about our unions, our relationships. They go to, for example, the Association of Psychiatrists and Psychologists, and they say that if you claim that LGBT attraction is a psychological condition, you are discriminating against us. So they put pressure on professionals to change their terminology, their language, their practices. In Western countries, for example, they have prohibited what they call gay conversion therapy. According to them, somebody who claims they are gay should not receive any form of psychiatric or psychological care or therapy to get them to change or to deal with that unwanted same-sex attraction. So this is part of how what is happening in the bedroom goes outside the bedroom. And of course, it starts outside the bedroom and then it ends up outside the bedroom. Because if, for example, there is incest or rape in the bedroom, the effects go outside the bedroom. If somebody gets into an unwanted pregnancy in the bedroom, the effect on the health system, on their care, goes outside the bedroom. So there's a very useful document, and I asked my colleague Kevin Yoga to share it, and I believe Dr. Home will talk more about it, on some of the risks to gay sex. There are numerous risks, both to the individual. There's a lot of harm that it causes to the individual at a physical level because of using, allow me to use some euphemism and say using an exit as an entrance biologically in the sexual act causes a lot of physical harm, psychological harm to the individual involved. It causes a moral harm to the person, causes harm to the family. So these harms have been kind of like listed. There have been a lot of studies. And in fact, those who engage in gay sex behavior, they're saying are part of the hidden crisis in the health system. So you have doctors dealing with people who, for example, are facing rectal incompetence or anal incompetence. They cannot keep their stool. They have to use adult nappies. All these kind of things are happening. But once this action started in the bedroom, it started in the bedroom, but it has gone beyond the bedroom. So just scroll down very quickly, Kevin. Yes, so here you have the key areas. The executive summary of this document gives the key dangers or harms of gay sex. The promiscuity levels are very high among those who engage in gay sex. Just scroll down. Then after that, you have physical health. No, don't scroll down further. Remain on that page, Kevin. Yes, you have danger to physical health. And these are the things that result in those injuries, both for gays and for lesbians. Just go back up to the second column. You have dangers to their mental health, significant, very elevated levels of depression, antisocial behavior, drug use, low life expectancy. Then they are not able to engage in monogamy, even in the countries where they introduce stable gay unions. And of course, that causes a lot of harm to them. So this is just a summary of some of the injury caused by gay sex. So in conclusion, the premise of John Stuart Mill, as interpreted by Wolfenden and Professor Hart, has been proven wrong. When you allow the people to do the thing in the bedroom, it overflows. It affects the individual, it affects the family, it affects their relationships, their community, their workplaces. And then it forces those who are opposed to this ideology to go to the fringes of society. If you are a Christian baker and you are baking a cake and you don't support this gay ideology, you decide not to sell a wedding cake for a gay wedding, then they take away your license. If you are a Christian pastor and you start teaching against the dangers of gay ideology, they start profiling you, they take you before human rights commissions and committees and so on. So I'm just demonstrating that this thing that was claimed to be within the bedroom cannot stay within the bedroom. And that is because every human act, properly speaking, always has an internal effect on the person and an external effect on society. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Charles Kanjama. What a spirited traitor is. Harm is not only physical, harm can be gradual, it can aggregate. And that document, we'll try as much as possible to make it available. If you contact NAYNET, if you contact KCPF, we'll be sure to send it to you. It's by Dr. John Diggs. I have personally read it, and I can assert that even what Charles Kanjama has shared is but a drop in the ocean. The executive summary is really brief. You need to read the entire document to really understand the dangers that are forthcoming. Let me come to Colette Akwana and maybe ask Colette. Colette, people may say, fine, the KCPF, NAYNET, the Catholic Doctors Association, all these organizations, the churches, you seem to be really spirited against this thing. But isn't it true that you are all just hiding under your Christian beliefs? Isn't it true that you guys are just homophobic and you are just, trying to pretend that you're trying to put up a very professional front, Yet in truth, you know that Christians cannot tolerate this thing and they are antisocial as far as LGBTQ relationships are concerned. And therefore, Christians should remain in the confines of spiritual spaces and not come to the forefront and talk about this matter in the legal and political spaces. What would you respond to that? How would you respond to that?
I think let me just pick it up from where Charles has left it. They're not bedroom matters. In fact, what makes us be involved is that they have stepped out of the bedroom matters. Sexuality is one of those areas that straddles between legislation and morality. So that you ask yourself, that line is not very clear. And then you ask yourself certain questions. Why is prostitution illegal? You're talking about two consenting adults, carrying out a sexual act. Why is it that most employers discourage, and even in some companies, it could be a ground for summary dismissal when two consenting co-workers engage in an affair or conduct any sexual activities, again, in the bedroom? Why is it that adultery is a legal ground for divorce? That line between sexuality and morality and law is not often very clear. And in order for us to stop wasting time on looking for where the line begins and where it ends, we don't waste time and start invoking the law. And we realize that the purpose of law is not just to, resolve disputes, but it's also to give a guidepost for the minimally acceptable standards in society that establish, law and order. And I think, as Charles mentioned, throw some paper today, it may have no impact, but accumulated throwing of paper by everyone at certain places, of course, the church has to be involved, the society has to be involved. The role of the church, therefore, complements the role of law. So where the law gives you a minimally acceptable standard, the church comes in to ensure that that standard is not just kept, but keeps on being maintained and being elevated with every passing generation. So that you don't want to be in a position where there's lawlessness and there's, lack of acceptance of certain minimals that now exist because of, maybe law has said or what society has gone on to say. The church has to be very constant. If you look at Article 45, and I'll just read that for you. Article 45 of the Constitution. The family, remember we're talking about sexuality, family is under attack, and I know that Antonina, Dr. Mahome will address it. But the precursor to Article 45 is that the family is the natural and fundamental unit of society and the necessary basis of social order, Without that anchor, without that appreciation, really, what are we talking about? This is the precursor introductory statement of Article 45 of our Constitution, not of South Africa, of America, of ours. And it continues to say, after that statement, and shall enjoy the recognition and protection of the state. So if the state can be involved, why not the church? I keep on saying that this is a moving wheel. And when it comes to matter sexuality, it's a moving wheel. Consider it as a circle with 4 quadrants. The Constitution is there, and I'll tell you how the Constitution, even just beyond Article 45, calls for the participation of the voice of the church. The Constitution is in one quadrant. The country is in another quadrant because this is a combination of not just the voices of a select few, but really the majority, the people behind the nation. The country is in that quadrant. The children are also in that quadrant, because when you talk about matter sexuality and in the context of the LGBTQIA plus whatever kind of rights, they are not just targeting the you and I's. In fact, the you and I's are really, as they say in Mombasa, sauti ya chura. Haimzui ng'ombe kunywa maji. As we are the sauti ya churas. But the main target is really the children. And children have specific rights that have been anchored in our constitution, key of which is to enjoy parental protection and care. These rights are infringing and have an intention, as will be passed down, not just from the rulings and the movements that we're seeing now, but specifically targeted to a section who have to be protected, not just by the constitution or families, but by the church in the failure of those two. And then now you have the fourth quadrant, which is the church. So you cannot, it's part of the same moving wheel. You cannot discuss about matter sexuality without the involvement of those parties. If you look at our constitution, the preamble of the constitution, and I'll read it to you, the Constitution 2010, acknowledging, it starts by saying, we the people of Kenya, acknowledging the supremacy of the Almighty God of all creation. There has been a lot of talk about take God out of the picture. It's about you Christians. Religion is really against this. Our constitution acknowledges the supremacy of the Almighty God of all creation. In acknowledging that supremacy, when you accord a supreme being, or you accord supremacy to a person, to God, it really is without question that you are going to argue or entertain any form of compromise with what this supreme being or institution directs. So we as a people of Kenya have already acknowledged that supremacy of God Almighty, which means it has to be part of the conversation as we're talking about matters sexuality, matters environment, and all other matters, because what it is that is the root definition of whatever it is we are holding on to is pegged on that acknowledgement. It also talks about proud of our ethnic, cultural, and religious diversity. So whether we liked it or not, we have already been identified under the true proud, not pride, that we have to be involved. So there's certain ethnic appreciations to the context and the conversations that we will have as a society. There's certain cultural conversations or aspects that we will have to consider. And you cannot take away the fact that there are certain religious conversations that we would have. So if that comes from a lawyer, if that comes from Antonina, if that comes from Ernest, it is part of the pride that the Constitution is actually upholding. It's a conversation that you have to be involved in. Committed to nurturing and protecting the well-being of the individual, the family. This is the Constitution. The family, communities, and the nation. We are actually saying the people of Kenya are committed. That's what I'm saying. It is a conversation in the quadrant that involves the country, and we, the people of Kenya, are committed to protecting the family. And of course, last but not least, adopt, enact, and give the Constitution to ourselves and to our future generations. So to the extent that our future generations play a huge role in benefiting or de-benefiting from the issues that we are articulating, that may straddle between law and morality, and where we are still trying to identify where the role is, we are going to anchor ourselves in the Constitution. We have been given a place in law, and we are going to take that place rightfully, unapologetically, and very clearly, and make it known that we do not ascribe to some of these ideologies.
Wow, amazing. Another spirited treatise by Colette Akwana, isn't it? Don't you guys just enjoy it when lawyers give their views, so spirited, very convincing, and also very enlightening. And like as Steve Kiteto says, disagreeing with me. Very insightful when the Constitution is unpacked in this manner. And I like that we have Colette and we've got Charles Kanjama here, because we as Christians need to look at this matter, not just from a spiritual perspective, but also from a legal perspective, from a political perspective. Let me come to Antonina, and then I'll come to Dr. Wahome. Antonina, perhaps someone would say, all right, let's perhaps turn a bit spiritual. And someone would say, you Christians, someone would take a jab at us and say that the Bible that you ascribe to is filled with some outdated concepts. When I read the Old Testament, I read portions that say there are some clothes I should not wear. I should not mix my jeans with my silk shirt. You know, neither should I eat certain foods. I'm told it is wrong to eat sausages, pork. You know, it was prohibited by the Lord to eat some of these foods. And yet you Christians conveniently ignore some of those rules. In fact, I think your Muslim brothers are more faithful. They still keep some of those rules. But why is it that you Christians don't keep those parts of the Bible? And it seems as if you guys are cherry picking. You choose to, the Bible is right as far as this matter of homosexuality is concerned, but on this matter of food to eat, clothes to wear, things to do, you seem to completely ignore that. Isn't this hypocrisy from the church?
Wow, thank you. That is a very valid question. Allow me to just make a comment in view of what my sister Colette has just shared. I am proud to be Kenyan. Yes, I am proud to be Kenyan, because our constitution anchors the idea of protecting family. And I'm so excited that on this platform, we are unapologetically Christian. And I want to begin my response to you, Ernest, by saying, people have a problem with God. That is why we are having this conversation. You see, God says in Isaiah chapter 33, verse 22, that he is our judge, he is our lawgiver, and he is our king. Now, those three qualities about who God is, those are the issues that people do not want to have. People want to define their lives, define their parameters of engagement. They do not want to acknowledge that God is lawgiver. But in this conversation, you cannot discuss humanity outside of the Creator. Now, if we want to go to the Creator, then we want to begin where Jesus himself says in the book of, I believe it is Matthew chapter 19, verse 8, he actually begins by making a statement when he's having a conversation about marriage, that it was not so from the beginning. So the question of how we order our families, how we order our sexuality, what we do, what we do not do, what we wear, what we do not wear, is informed and instructed by the designer. Because if we talk about the beginning, who was there in the beginning? For heaven's sake, only God was there in the beginning. And Genesis tells us clearly that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. In other words, there is a design to everything. There's an intention to everything. There is an acceptable way of doing everything. Now, the question of the fact that Christians today do not adhere to some of the laws that we find in the Old Testament points to a problem that God discusses in Hosea 4:6. He says, my people perish, why? Because of lack of knowledge. Anyone who does a diligent study of the scriptures will understand that when God gave the law, because he is the lawgiver, there are different codes that he gave. When he gave the cleanness code, which is largely what we find in Leviticus and the other books in the Pentateuch, he gave them in a context. What was the context? Israel was a theocracy. Kenya and many other countries are not theocratic, all right? We have disconnected ourselves largely to the conversation where God is our king. But when Israel was a theocracy, God gave the cleanness code, what is acceptable in worship, what they shouldn't do, what they should wear, not mixing different garments, and all those kinds of laws. He even told them what to eat and what not to eat, all right? And it is in the context of Israel as a theocratic nation where God is king. But we also all know that Israel at some point also decided we do not want theocracy. They told Samuel, we do not want this God who leads us to battle and we don't see him. We want to have a king like all the other nations. So at some point in history, Israel departed from being a theocratic nation. Even in fact, by the time that Jesus Christ is coming into the scene, Israel is not a theocracy. It is being ruled by Rome, all right? So there's a different code that is required. So that when we look at the three different codes that God gave in the law, what we see upheld in the times of Jesus and in the times of the apostles, which is the model for us, it is the moral law. The moral law that God gave stands as a standard for all people in all generations. And right now we are having this conversation because there is a departure from the moral standards that God has set with regard to sex and sexuality. I would say this in summary, that when God set his law, David actually observes in Psalm 19 and he says, you do not make God lose anything by disobeying his law. He loses nothing, he gains nothing. But when he gives us his law is good. His law is supposed to guide us. His law is good for us. His law gives us life and health in our bones. In fact, to depart from the law of God is to attract death and damnation. And that's exactly what we're having this conversation about. We are concerned that the homosexual lifestyle, where men have sex with men, where women burn with lustful desire for one another, these things are harmful and hurtful to the community that is family. It brings confusion in society. It brings, it is a sterile lifestyle. It is a lifestyle that literally God shuns. And so even as we are having this conversation, let us remember and appreciate that our God is good. When he gives us the law that he does, it is for our posterity. And in fact, in this particular conversation, I usually invite people to consider the fact that God says he is love. That means that you can never love people more than their God loves them. And if their God categorically says, this is out of order, I abhor this sexual perversion, it is in order to uphold the righteous standards of a holy God. Therefore, when we consider particularly how he has ordered that a man and a woman will come together in the state of marriage and go ahead to have children. Children, therefore, are supposed to be entrusted in this safe, sacred space called family. But unfortunately, when we adopt certain sexual perversion, the reality is that there is not just confusion, but we literally attract the wrath of a holy God. So that right now, I would even invite us to consider Sodom and Gomorrah, when we refer to it, because that is one of the texts that people want to say, God is a wrathful God, God is a hateful God. No. When God did what he did by raining his wrath on these cities that were perverted, he was actually demonstrating his love for the family unit and for the posterity of humanity. And he knew if these people are allowed to continue with their perversion, what will happen to the human race? The numbers will come down. We attract his wrath, and so we set ourselves up for judgment. Now, God's judgment is terrible. He destroyed the people in the time of Noah, the deluge, the flood, the great flood, and only spared the family. Why? Because of sexual perversion. He destroyed 24,000 in the times of Balaam and Balak in Numbers 22. Why?
Just a minute, Antonina. Thank you. Yes. Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much. Such, again, a spirited presentation. And Antonina just reminding us that we've got moral laws in the scriptures and we've got ceremonial laws. And the ceremonial laws were given to Israel as a theocratic nation. And I think also good to say that Christ fulfilled the ceremonial laws, and Christians are therefore not compelled to keep the ceremonial law, but we are compelled to keep the moral law. I know I may be a bit strict on time because I know we've got just an hour and a few minutes to go. But let me come to, I know Charles Kanjama needs to leave, and I still have got something that I wanted him to contribute. But let me just perhaps ask Dr. Wahome to speak before Charles Kanjama comes in. Dr. Wahome, someone would say, perhaps from looking at persons with intersex, they were born that way. These are people who've got genitalia that seems to be deformed. Would in that point perhaps to the idea that LGBTQ matters are natural as far as biology is concerned?
Now, it's a good question, and I think is another area that needs clarity. We need to separate two groups of people. We have brothers and sisters who actually experience same-sex attraction. And we have brothers and sisters who believe that they are not the same sex as they were born with. Now, these are psychological issues. And there is a gentleman who has worked with about 2,000 male men who were previously attracted or actively involved in same-sex relationships, who have come out of that and have been able to find healing. And he found 4 things that are very similar in those people. That they were either physically or sexually abused by someone in the family or outside the family, that they experience a hostile or detached or an absent father, or they experience an overprotective or controlling mother, or they had a feeling that they were not accepted by peers who are of the same sex, bullying and that kind of thing. So you find that same-sex attraction has a root that is usually found in adverse childhood events. It is not natural because the act of sex is a procreative act, and in nature, it is designed to produce offsprings. And therefore, attraction between sexes should be opposite, so that is how we find our spouses. This is not just among human beings. It is basically the nature or the object, the purpose of what sexual intercourse was designed is not pleasure, it is procreation. The aspect of pleasure is what you would call an incentive. The main purpose is so that we can be able to get children. So any attraction that would not achieve that purpose then is abnormal. It is not normal. It is inconsistent with the purpose of our sexuality. Now, rejecting your biological sex is also inconsistent because there is no way you can change from male female. People can have surgery, people can take hormones. The most you get is a good fake, but you can never become the original. And you cannot perform all the activities of a female. Then, of course, Kanjama explained that sexual intercourse basically has organs that are engineered towards that. The male organ delivers the male seed into the female receives, incubates that, and gives us a baby. Now, the anus and the mouth are not part of the sexual system. They are part of the digestive system. And when you use them for sex, then you cause terrible damage to those organs. You bring infections and other things that shouldn't be there. So the idea is, from a medical perspective, is if somebody says, I am a woman, and you can see clearly they are a man, then that person is suffering a mental condition called delusion. And it is important to find out why they are experiencing these things and then help them to find healing. If somebody is attracted to a person of the same sex and actually looks at a person of the same sex as a mate, as somebody with whom they can have a sexual relationship, then that person is also deluded because it is not possible for that relationship to give us procreation. So again, we must find out why they feel the way they feel. The male-female differences are engineered. Now we come back to the intersex child. The X chromosome, the Y chromosome is what makes the boy. So if you are XX in your genes, then you're female. If you're XY in your genes, then you're male. What happens with the intersex child at the point of fertilization, there is a problem that occurs. And either they have one of the sex genes missing, or they have two extra sex genes, or they have double the number of sex genes. And we end up with the system not developing as it should. So we either have an underdeveloped male system, or an underdeveloped female system, or an abnormally developed male or female system. And when a child is born in the hospital, we look between the legs and we are able to say, this is a boy, this is a girl, is a purely a scientific observation of the external genitalia. But in the intersex, they are born and you look between the legs and they have what we call ambiguous genitalia. You cannot tell whether this child is a boy or a girl. You check their genetics, it is not conclusive because something is wrong with the genetic makeup. You try to do hormones, you cannot get very clear pictures. You try to do ultrasounds and other images, you cannot get very clear pictures. And for the intersex child, then doctors have to assign a sex. That we have examined this child and we with everything that we have, though not conclusive, we think this child is a boy or we think this child is a girl. And these children are then brought up with the assigned sex. And there is a natural resolution to the problem, because at the point of adolescence, when the secondary sexual characteristics develop, you might find testes that were not visible on the usual ultrasound because they are not normal, or gametes, gonads that were not visible because they are not normal, start producing the correct hormones. And finally, then you notice that this child is now maturing into a boy or is maturing into a girl. At that point, if the assigned sex was wrong, then it becomes necessary for that child's sex to be changed on their documents. So the intersex is a disorder of sex development. It is not a personhood. Nobody should say, I am intersex. You should say that I have intersex. It is a condition. You are a human being. You are made in the image and likeness of God, but you have a condition called intersex that is an abnormality of sex development. So because there is that need for those children to be transitioned if the sex ascribed to them at birth was wrong, that is why the transgender community is interested in the intersex child. Otherwise, the intersex child is not a part of those alphabets.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Ahome. A very clear presentation. I know Charles Kanjama is about to leave, so very quickly, I don't know if he's still with us. Charles Kanjama, in light of the recent ruling by our courts concerning allowing the LGBTQ movement to have an association, not an association, what was it?
An association.
An association, yes. That caught many Kenyans by surprise. Perhaps maybe you could just enlighten us to how we got here and what can we do? Is there anything that is required from us, or should we just sit and watch and hope that the likes of you and Colette will save the day for us?
Okay, very well, thank you. Let me start, Ernest, by saying that because we are concerned about the family, the main reason why we are here reflecting is because this sexual ideology, I'll call it a liberal sexual ideology or a radical sexual ideology, that assumes that the human person is completely autonomous. They can make decisions of whatever to do, and that the nature that they have received from God should not be a significant or defining factor in determining how we identify ourselves, how we are attracted, and how we behave from a sexual position. So this sexual ideology harms the family. And I think that is what we have tried to explain before. And so the question is, why are we concerned about it? And I'll talk about the Supreme Court case. But first, let me make it clear that matters to do with family and family values affect all of us because they come to us through our culture. So it's important for us to keep in mind that when we are talking about laws, the reason you are interested in the laws in different countries and the policies by different governments and institutions is because that is one of the key elements in which culture is instilled, imparted, and even transformed. It is not adequate to just focus on laws if you are interested about cultural influences that may help or may harm an individual or a family. There are other cultural influences that come to us through communication, what I call language, education, peer pressure, etc. There are cultural influences that come to us through institutions, and laws are just one of the ways in which institutions manifest their values. And then, of course, cultural influences come to us through our leaders and role models. We imitate others, we observe others. Those who get into LGBT behavior, many times it is because LGBT ideology normalizes, rationalizes, and even glorifies this kind of behavior, makes it look like something heroic and attractive. So what happens is that many countries in the past had laws outlawing various aspects of same-sex behavior. The idea was that if somebody has a predisposition to an action that is going to harm themselves or society or someone else, they need to restrain themselves from kind of like manifesting that action. So if one has a psychological condition of kleptomania, and that means that they are attracted, they have a strong impulse to grab things that don't belong to them. They go to a supermarket, they are grabbing commodities there, left, right, and center. They may be rich, they may be poor. They cannot be permitted by society to manifest and express that kleptomania because it involves a trespass and conversion of other people's property. It harms society. If somebody feels a strong attack, has a condition of being a sociopath, and because of their psychological disturbance in their head, they are prone to acts of murder or rape or violence. The society doesn't tell them, doesn't affirm that sociopathy or those psychopathic tendencies. It heals them, it cures them, but it also prohibits that behavior. And when they engage in the behavior, they are punished because that's the only way in which you can stop those dangerous conditions from developing. If somebody has a tendency because of, for example, being a nymphomaniac, this is a condition that sometimes affects females, where, or even males, there's a similar condition where they just feel driven to engage in promiscuous acts of sex with everyone, left, right, and center. It damages their families, hurts their children, hurts their marriages. They have to be guided both by the state, by religion, and by various institutions to restrain themselves and to try and seek some kind of healing. So that was the approach that had been taken by various countries. Many countries have changed their laws on this issue, apart from a majority of the countries in Africa and the Middle East and a few other places. You have some countries which have laws against LGBT behavior and also against LGBT engaging in those activities that they engage in. So what happened is that there is a gentleman called Eric Gitari, who is an activist for the LGBT group of those who tried to insist that they are LGBT, and he went to court asking for a court order to compel the NGO Coordination Board to register a non-governmental organization for an entity that was going to be called Gays and Lesbians Human Rights Commission or Coalition. And the NGO board had refused to do this because we have some laws prohibiting homosexual behavior in Kenya. And those laws are in our penal code. And so the NGO board said, even though you are saying that your organization's purpose is to support human rights of gays and lesbians, it is contrary to public policy to register an organization with this name that seems to give the impression to society that it is okay to engage in gay and lesbian behavior. So the High Court ruled in favor of Eric Gitari and said that this organization is not going to engage in criminal acts based on the objects that have been proposed of the organization, and there's no problem with the name. So the NGO board appealed to the Court of Appeal and subsequently to the Supreme Court. In both the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court, there were 5 judges sitting to hear the case. Unfortunately for the NGO board, they lost both appeals through a split decision, 3-2. In the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. So what the Supreme Court said in a decision that was issued on 24th of February of this year is that according to them, Article 27 of our Kenya Constitution, which prohibits discrimination on various grounds, including sex, according to the Supreme Court, the word sex there includes and means sexual orientation. So you cannot discriminate someone on the basis of sexual orientation. Of course, this was a grave misreading of the Constitution, even though the Supreme Court is the final authority, because the discrimination on the basis of sex is meant to refer to biological sex as male or female. And that prohibition actually appears in numerous legal documents, including human rights instruments. There has never been a debate, a serious debate on the matter.
Sorry, Charles. Can I ask us to mute our microphones? Regina Naya, your microphone is on. Please switch it off. Meanwhile, I'll ask our administrators to just take care of that. Meanwhile, Charles Kanjama, as you go on.
Okay, thank you. So the Supreme Court gave this decision, which would have far-reaching effects because it would mean that the various cultural safeguards in the community to try and stop the LGBT ideology from spreading to our children, in our families, in education systems, has basically been dismantled. So this is what it means. And also it would mean that if you allow people to register an organization purporting to do something that is related to a prohibited action in the penal code, it will have grave effects on the rule of law. Because tomorrow somebody can register an association for tax evaders, to support tax evaders. They'll say, no, as we are not engaged in tax evasion, but you want to give advice to those maybe who are involved in this issue, or bandits or anything else. And we had actually made this argument to the court because I was involved in that case. I was actually involved as the advocate for the NGO board, and Kenya Christian Professionals Forum was also involved. They had an advocate, they were an interested party, but the court ignored these arguments. So the current situation is one that is of concern. The approach that KCPF has identified, I want to request Kevin to share the 5 powers to deal with the LGBT ideology. I'll go through it very quickly because we need to allow others to speak. The approach that KCPF has adopted is to recognize that we need to deal with the various aspects of culture. So to deal with the law or the legal change by trying to pass, first of all, to apply for review of that decision in the Supreme Court. Chances of success are not very high, and that will take some time. to work with Parliament to pass laws that can tie up some of the other loose ends in the issue of LGBT, to propose a constitutional amendment to fight against that interpretation of the court, which is contrary to the view that Kenyans had in 2010 when we passed the constitution. Fundamentally, we think that to deal with the LGBTQ ideology, there are 5 steps or 5 powers that we need to invoke. The first is the power of prayer. And allow me to say, like Dr. Home mentioned, we want to distinguish between the LGBT ideology and the persons who are affected by same-sex attraction, unwanted same-sex attraction, and they're struggling against it. Our approach is that for those who are involved in that situation, they may be our children, they're in our schools, they're in our families. We need to find ways of counseling them and helping them to be able to get a proper integration of sexuality within the person, which is what chastity is all about. But for the ideology that wants to promote and glorify LGBT and normalize it, we have these 5 powers to deal with it. And the first is the power of prayer. We believe that prayer can move mountains. We want to ask Christians and other people of faith to pray so that we can find solutions to the cultural challenges we are facing. The second is the power of the podium. The biggest challenge in the West is that they have lost the courage to speak out against the ills of the LGBT ideology. There's a lot of self-censorship happening, and we believe we need to speak out publicly and boldly and confront this and expose the harms that are coming from LGBT. The third is the power of the people. For example, to amend the constitution, one of the routes is through popular initiative. We need 1 million signatures. We need to manifest our opposition to this cultural imperialism coming from the West to push LGBT down our throats, even in the West, because of their attitudes and their cultural acceptance of LGBT. Every generation, the percentage of people engaging in LGBT has been doubling. Not every generation is doubling almost every 10 or 15 years. And this is a crisis, because the moment culture and society says this is okay, more people start experimenting with it, and then the harm becomes almost irreversible. The fourth is the power of the pen. We've noticed that those who support this LGBT ideology, they tend to come up with all kinds of research, sometimes, many times not supported by proper rigorous science. And we need those who have understood the problems to write clearly, to communicate, to educate others in various media forms or various means of mass media. And finally, there's a lot of money promoting this cause. And we need to get those who recognize the threat of LGBT to be ready to contribute also financially and with other resources to mobilize for the advocacy and the engagement. Thank you, Ernest.
Thank you so much, Charles Kanjama. What a wonderful takeoff for us. The power of prayer, the power of podiums, the power of people, the power of the pen, and the power of the past. And I think I'll just take this opportunity before we go on to just ask that the people in attendance, organizations like KCPF are working very hard to ensure that those 5 methods are fleshed out. And you can partner with KCPF. You could give to KCPF. Some of you have got financial opportunities and you're wondering where your money can go towards helping this cause. You can contact KCPF and you can find out how your money can help towards that particular initiative. And also to remind us that this conversation is leading towards 2 major events. The first one is the Family Symposium that is going to be held on Friday, the 12th of May, between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. at Seaton Valley Road. The Family Symposium is basically about protecting family values in changing times. We will have a wonderful panel there, and we will, the cost is 2,000 shillings. We'll be sending out posters. You should see them in your local listings. And then the next day, on Saturday, the 13th of May, we will have the March for the Family, which is part of point number 3 that Charles Kanjama had raised, the power of the people. So all that information, you can see that it's there on your screen, but again, we'll be sure to reiterate it. The March is free, the symposium is 2,000 shillings, and I can see there's also the ACPF regional conference at Emory Hotel. We'll talk about that day. We'll talk about that towards the end. So let me just come back to our panelists, and I'll ask. I've got Coletta, Antonina, and Wahome. Perhaps let me throw some questions. You guys can perhaps think about them as I perhaps give you the order in which you'll answer. Perhaps, Dr. Home, you could think about this question: how can we respond to someone who is struggling with same-sex attraction? Because Kanjama has clearly said that we're talking about 2 different people. We're talking about there are people who are activists trying to push the LGBT ideology, and then we've got the people who are struggling. How can we respond to them? And I will also ask Antonina to weigh in on how to respond to children who perhaps may have gender dysphoria. What do we do when we see as if children seem to be confused concerning their gender and concerning their ideologies? And then finally, Colette, I'll ask you perhaps to weigh in on if the church takes affirmative action, or if the church takes these 5 ways in which Charles Kanjama has asked us to perhaps consider: power of prayer, power of podiums, power of people, power of the pen, power of the past. Will we be actively working against, wouldn't that rally people perhaps to be antithetical or perhaps hateful towards the LGBT community? Wouldn't that create animosity in the nation? Won't that create a mini civil war? Won't there be 2 factions? Won't these actions that seem very noble work against the very cause of the nation? So I'm going to ask us to try and answer those questions within 3 minutes each, a maximum of 3 minutes. And then I'm going to ask our audience to send in questions. Please send in your questions in the comment section, in the chat box. I'm sure our panelists will be more than happy to answer them. So let me start with Dr. Wahome Ngare. Dr. Wahome, are you there?
Yes. Again, thank you for that question. I think that is how we should approach the whole question. If somebody comes to you and they say, I am homosexual, the first question we should ask them is, what do you mean? Because that brings out the issue. If they say, I feel I'm attracted to people of the same sex, then that is not a personhood. That is not an identity. You cannot label yourself by how you feel. So you are a human being. You're just like me. You're created in the image and likeness of God. If you feel attracted to people of the same sex, then let us deal with that concern. Don't make it your personhood. Let us deal with that concern. It is not normal. It is not natural to feel that way, but it is true you're feeling it. Let us find out what happened. Then we can share with them the 4 reasons why I say the 4 reasons that have come out. Adverse childhood events are the commonest cause of that, other than the experimentation and other things. Have they ever been physically abused or sexually abused as a child, as far as they can remember? Have they had a hostile or detached father, or is their father absent from their lives? Has their mother been overprotective, controlling? Have they been feeling that they are not accepted by people of the same sex as they grow up? And as these things are explored, it is possible to then find that there is that brokenness that took them into this tangent. And if that matter then is addressed, then they may find healing. Now, you may not be able to do this as a father, as a mother, as a parent, as a pastor. They may need, depending on how severely injured they are, they may need actually clinical psychologists who would then help them to walk through this. It's always good to have a bias of Christian clinical psychologists, because some of the psychologists we have today have been trained using this gender ideology, and they would encourage that kind of behavior or affirm it, which would be very destructive. Now, if the question is, I'm engaging in same-sex activity, then that would take, other than what we have just discussed, which would be the general format, there would be also the question of, are they people of faith? Are they Christians? If they are Christians, then we address it the same way we would address any other challenges that we experience in our lives. I am a married man. I still find other women who are attractive, who are not my wife. So I'm attracted to people of the opposite sex generally because I'm a man. But what do I do with that attraction? Do I follow through with it and then commit adultery? Or do I contain myself and understand that that is somebody's, it could be somebody's wife, that could be somebody's daughter, that is somebody's child, and I must respect them for who they are and not indulge in things that will destroy their life morally and also destroy mine. So from the perspective of dealing with the challenge of attraction, it is no different from what a person who's attracted to people of this opposite sex should do. Remember again, Ernest, that attraction is never sin. In fact, if somebody never tells you about their sexual preferences, you would not know. And these are matters that we are saying homosexuality or attraction to the same sex, or even people having sex with the people of the same sex are not new. They didn't start today. But society would not bring them to a point of discussion because people never identify themselves publicly to say that they are doing this and they are committing this. Even the fellows who are involved in adultery don't go around saying, my name is so-and-so and I'm an adulterer.
Did we lose Dr. Home? In the middle of such a powerful point. Dr. Home, can you hear me?
Sorry, I was using my phone and somebody was calling. So I'm sorry about that, but the idea is that we do not label ourselves with our passions. It is therefore not an exception. We shouldn't do that for our sexuality either. So that's how it should be approached. It should be approached from a point of, what do you mean? So that we stop using the terms created by the people of the ideology. Stop calling people homosexuals. Stop calling people transgenders. Just don't identify yourself as heterosexual. Those terms are not ours. They are designed to cause confusion. So if somebody says I'm homosexual, just ask them, what do you mean? If somebody says I am transgender, what do you mean? I am a man, but I believe I am a woman. Then now we have an issue of what you're living is delusional and it is not correct. And we need to find out why you feel that way. And then we can find a solution. Now, the people who want to normalize those, then those ones we must challenge aggressively, because those ones are the ones who are causing the confusion.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Home. And I hope we've taken note of that so that we understand that we need to have this confusion. I think I don't know how, for you who are parents, or if you're not parents, if your kid walked up to you and told you, Mom, Dad, I am gay, what would you do? I think the average African parent would begin to cast out demons and begin to call on the name of Jesus, in order to deal with this thing aggressively. But I like that Dr. Home has given us just a very conversational approach towards this. I would like to perhaps change Antonina's question, because I like what Dr. Home has covered. It has kind of slipped into what I had asked you. I want you to just answer this question. How do we raise the next generation of young people in light of the ongoing sexual liberalism? I know I've caught you off guard, Antonina. I've given you a different question, but how do we raise the next generation of young people in light of ongoing sexual liberalism? And as you think about that, let me meanwhile have Colette answer her question, and then we'll come to Antonina. And I can see their questions coming in my inbox. I can see them. Some of you are reiterating what Daktari has said. I am seeing them, and I will be sure to pass them on to our able panelists. So Colette, do you mind going first? Then Antonina will come and answer the new question I've given her.
Ernest, I think it's very important for us to understand one very fundamental thing. This is not a war, church v LGBTQIA+ community. You'd be very surprised walking into the streets and asking an average man, do you or do you not? You probably will get a nay other than a yay. Yes. Having said that, the church has over the years, I think through various different seasons of life, encountered a lot of pushback on certain things that we have held dear and we have held to have stood true. And our role is not to, lean back or to find ways within which to, batter what the truth is or what the reality is. Our way is just to stand. For me as a Christian lawyer, mine is really to look at what the law says in the context of what God says and put them together to the next generation. I'm passing on a baton to the next generation. So I'm not going to be necessarily concerned about, what the society thinks and, what pushback I may get from certain communities. Because unlike any other conversation, I think in the recent past, this is a conversation that has not just come out very clearly to be one in which the church has been involved in, but other religious organizations as well. Members of parliaments who probably we didn't know what their religious backgrounds are. It is really a collective voice that goes back to one of the quadrants I mentioned. It's a country voice. It's a constitutional voice that is just being echoed in the thread of the conversation. And the reason why the church would need to be involved, I think through the different P's that have been mentioned, and the podium, is to be able...
let me remind us to just have our microphones off. Colette, please go on.
The pen and the podium is to, in essence, put in a structure into the meaning of how this conversation is going to be held. We don't want to be very reactive, as has been, oh, you guys are. No, we're going to sit down, we're going to articulate our points, and we're going to come out very clearly on why we're talking about this. And one of the reasons through which this becomes very important and why the church should at the very forefront be driving this conversation, supported by the respective professionals, is because unlike any other fundamental right of freedom in the Constitution, this specific class of persons are seeking to seek reinforcement or enforcement or recognition of quote-unquote sexuality rights. In that being recognized or being upheld or being given room, as a lawyer, the first thing that comes to my mind is the scale and the place of other rights within the Constitution. These sexuality rights that are now, being propagated and being driven are not just coming in to distract the way law and order operates. It is going to infringe on the fundamental rights and freedoms that you and I enjoy. Talk about your freedom of expression. Everyone can go on social media and propagate whatever it is that they are propagating. But I, as Colette Akwana, wearing a Christian lawyer hat, says no. Suddenly, you're homophobic. Or suddenly, you don't have a right to do so. Or suddenly, you're speaking hate speech. So it infringes on my right to do so. Your freedom of association. I now cannot, almost freely, sign up and come in for this because we'll be labeled as some Christians meeting somewhere to discuss about this very pertinent issue. So my freedom of association, in their freedom of association being allowed, is coming in to infringe on my freedom of association. It is also coming in to hinder how I enjoy my freedom of assembly, demonstration, petition. We've seen Citizen Go Kenya, and Kyoko is here. I mean, in a short while, legislation may be passed, policies may be effected, that you cannot speak against certain things, you cannot petition against certain things. stemming from the fact of one, sexuality rights. Your economic and social rights are now not almost in existence. Talk about the right to family, which I don't even need to belabor. Talk about the rights of children, the parental care and protection, which every child under the Constitution and the children laws are protected from, is now being lifted away. And as a parent, I cannot, have this right and enjoy it with my children. So it comes in, and the church would need to be involved through the support of the various professionals within the relevant fees to take up their position and address this. Because in allowing this or in keeping quiet, we are really walking and downtrodden on other fundamental rights and freedoms, which now becomes the conversation why, as a Christian lawyer, I need to stand in and weigh in on.
Wow. I like that, Colette. And I think Colette is really inspiring us to not be afraid, because what's happening in countries like the West, you find that men and women of good, noble character are afraid to speak up in fear of being labeled homophobic, transphobic, and that even if you bring forth very logical, sound arguments that are full of love and compassion, as long as you disagree with the ideology, you're called someone who is hateful, someone who is and against it. And I think I got a comment, someone wrote to me just right here, a private comment. Someone said, we need to also be careful with the relegation of to specialists. And I think you're just reiterating Dr. Wahome's point, the necessary need to be biased towards Christian psychologists or specialists, because in the US, people like Matt Walsh of the Daily Wire seem to be doing more than quote unquote clinical psychologists. That was a comment from Walimu. He just written to me privately. And thank you, Colette, just encouraging us to be bold and courageous, to not be afraid, because if we are silent, history will look at us harshly. Antonina, how do we raise the young people in light of ongoing sexual liberalism, especially children? Children are impacted by the LGBTQ movement. How do we raise the next generation in light of this liberalism?
Thank you. Thank you for that question. It's a very valid question, Ernest. And I want to speak from a perspective of Mzazi. I am a parent. And I want to also address this not just to those who are presently parents, but even those who are future parents, because even the future parents have an ambition, an aspiration that has been placed by God, that one day you will be able to carry child and be able to raise them up. So coming from that perspective, what does the Bible require of us? The Bible tells us and repeatedly reminds us that we are in warfare. So what I would encourage everyone who is listening to this conversation is to take up the posture of warfare, to take up the posture of one who is wrestling, because that's what we are told, that we are in a struggle. We are in a spiritual engagement. It is coming with different ideologies. So when you prepare yourself by getting into the posture of someone who is in warfare, then you are well equipped. This is far from what some people would dismiss and say, watu ni machizi tu, or people are just seeking attention, so we ignore them. No, this is warfare. We are coming against an opponent who is well organized, who is well coordinated, who is hugely and immensely funded, and who greatly hates God. So if we take the posture that we are coming against a formidable enemy, we may even feel like David coming against Goliath. But then we remember that we have a greater God who is a God who protects family. So that is the first thing that I would invite us to do. Now, I'd want to call our attention to Ephesians chapter 3, verse 15, that the cause of protecting family is at the core of who our God is. Ephesians chapter 3, verse 15 tells us about our God who is Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth receives its character. This is a warfare worth engaging in. And therefore, I would agree with the first statement that Dr. Wahome Ngare put out there, that he is here to contend for the faith and call on us as mzazi or future parents to contend That means that we persist in this conversation until the enemy is not just felled. You know, when Goliath was felled and his head cut off, the battle wasn't over. The Israelite men went after them, chasing them until the very last of them was brought down. That is the kind of mindset we need to take up when we are having this conversation. Therefore, especially it has been said that Kenyans forget very fast. So February, the Supreme Court has ruled as it did. Right now, we are having different other conversations, and it is very easy to be carried away and to forget the very essence of why we are having this conversation, to protect family. Therefore, if you're going to take the posture that you're going to wrestle, because that's what the Bible says, that we are wrestling, not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers and rulers of this dark world, therefore, you must guard your heart. You guard your heart from emotions that would deter you from effectively engaging. The emotions of hatred towards individual persons, we must guard against that. What we need to endear ourselves is to be able to understand, so what is the ideology behind this sexual revolution that we are hearing about? The sexual revolution of the 1960s, we must understand, is a social and cultural movement. It is seeking to change the social order, the cultural order. And having that understanding, it behoves us to engage from a place of understanding. So what do we stand for as a social people? As what are our cultural priorities and principles? I want to indicate 3 ideologies that are pushed.
Sorry.
There are 3.
Thank you. Go on, Antonina.
Yes. In understanding the enemy that we are confronting, we must understand the ideology that they are coming from or they are propagating. There are 3 ideologies that the sexual revolution is propagating. The first ideology is that sex can be separated from the fruit of sex. That is children. You can separate sex. You can have fun with sex. Sex is a human right, but it can be removed from the product or from the fruit of sex, that is babies. That is a direct onslaught against children and the next generation. Understanding that helps you as a parent to engage with our children and raise them up with a proper understanding of what the Bible teaches, that sex has a context. The context is in marriage, and it has an end goal, which is reproduction. The second ideology that is purported by this, the sexual revolution, is that you can separate both sex and babies from marriage. So it is a direct onslaught on marriage. And that's why we're seeing a lot of proliferation of divorce cases and all those things where marriage is no longer working. So if we're going to bring up the next generation, we must stand firmly to defend marriage. The marriage as God has defined it between a man and a woman, Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, as it has been said repeatedly. So we must be able to teach the next generation, our children, our youth, that it is in the context of marriage, biblical marriage, that sex should happen. Therefore, any activity of extramarital sex is not only forbidden, it is shunned by the Most High. The third principle that is purported by this sexual revolution is that the biological sex of the body you are born in does not matter. And that's where they push the idea of, transgenderism, where we have so many kids who are confused and they're seeking to change their body. So they are participating in these exercises, in these experiments, and they're mutilating their bodies. In bringing up the next generation, we must teach our children that the body that God made you in is his temple. That's what the Bible teaches. The body is honorable. The body is God's temple. Therefore, guard it from what you see, what you hear, the sexual engagement that you explore, you must protect the body, take care of the body, feed it right with the proper content, feed it right with the proper food, because it is the temple of the Holy Spirit. So in engaging with parenting or teaching the next generation, it will do well if the parent understands what we are up against.
Sorry, just as you, Anthony, as you wrap up. Mm-hmm.
Yes, as I wrap up, understand that the goal of the enemy is to bring in confusion to our to marriage, confusion with regard to family, so that right now children are wondering, so if you have 2 dads, is that a family? If you have 2 moms, is that a family? It is not a family. So we uphold what is the truth as it has been defined by the Bible, by the God of the Bible, and shun what the enemy is doing, and therefore also teach the children what the enemy is purporting. So prepare them by like immunizing them that this is what you can expect. You will be told. You will be told that your body doesn't matter. You will be told different things, but this is what the truth of the word of God stands for. That is what I would submit.
Thank you, Antonina. Thank you. Asante sana, Antonina. I like that you have brought us to just really look at children in that manner, that we cannot ignore the children. They are the next generation. And there are 3 questions that have come, and I'm going to just put them forward. And I think one of them, I'll give it to everyone. Someone asks, in light of the conversation, and I think these 3 questions are really the same thing. One says, in light of the conversation, how can young men that are passionate about standing for truth be guided towards pushing these conversations into our spaces in knowledge, because the information is scarce? And then another one asks, I've come across a number of same-sex attracted people who are struggling from poor backgrounds, leading them to psychologists is somehow killing their hope. How can the church be engaged, or even interested parties, towards reaching the roots of these behaviors? And then then the 3rd question is from John, who says, can we get consumable actions we can take? I think the problems are being overshared. Now, what can we do? Can we start now? And I think all these questions are basically asking the same thing: what can we do? So perhaps I will start by maybe just reminding us what we can do. For one, we can attend certain forums where we can get equipped on how to respond and how to actively participate in helping people who have got same-sex attraction, and in how we can use our careers to actively plug in to what KCPF is doing in order to fight this battle that Antonina is talking about. So that's the first thing. And we've got the Family Symposium coming up on the 12th of May next week. That's going to be on Friday between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. at Sitam Valley Road. Please attend the Family Symposium. That's one thing you can do. Attend it so that you can get equipped. The other one is the March for the Family that will be happening on Saturday, the 13th of May, 2023 this year, between 8 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. and it will start at Moy Avenue Primary School. Also, we have what we call the TOT, the Training of Trainers. What is the training of trainers? Perhaps you are seeking ways to help people who are struggling, or perhaps you're seeking for ways to be equipped with information. We've got men and women from the National Association of Youth Workers Network, that is NAYNET, who are passionate in training men and women on how to be equipped with the necessary information. And so as part of this, we have, let me just get that document open. We have got Christabel Hawker. Christabel Hawker has 18 years of experience working with teens, families, schools, and the church to build capacity among parents, youth workers, and teachers that and equip the next generation on biblical sexuality. We've got Kechi Ayimba, who is the founder of Pearls and Treasures Trust in Kenya, who works locally and internationally to defend the pro-life cause and to also help with crisis pregnancy. We also have Steve Kiteto, who is the parenting coach at Badili Experience, and who also inspires a lasting change in people through coaching, training, and consulting in order to help them be anchored on the truth. And I will also speak for myself. I run a pornography addiction recovery program. And in my time in ministering, I've come to realize that pornography is a huge contributor to same-sex attraction problems. When pornography is largely available, and when men and women largely consume pornography, it's a big thing. It fuels that path of perversion, and you find yourself going down that path. So these opportunities are available. Please ensure you contact us through the number that was on the poster if you want to get in touch with any of these people, and in case you want to get trained, you want to know how you can plug in. KCPF is also another place where you can plug in. You can come in and participate, be a member of KCPF. You can give towards KCPF. One thing that we need to understand in the 5 points that Kanjama raised is the last point on the pass. This cannot happen without money. We need your money. And we want to ask you who are part of churches to even direct part of your income towards organizations like KCPF. They'll be very accountable on the spending. They'll be very accountable on the money is used, so that we can combine our efforts together in order to make lasting change. I can see those are the only questions so far. So maybe I will ask our panelists maybe to give us their parting shots, parting remarks. And then after our parting remarks, I'm going to invite Steve Kiteto to come and just give us some closing remarks, and to also perhaps just give one final push towards the family symposium. Let me perhaps start with Colette Akwana, then I'll go to Antonina Achieng, and then we'll wrap up with Dr. Wahome Ngare. Charles Kanjama had to leave, but I know, and let me just say this to the panelists, I know the time that you shared has been limited. And I would love, if it were up to me, I would have a conference each with each of you, one at a time, because I know there's a lot to be shared, and I know I'm just trying to be honorable this time. So please just forgive me, my panelists, for the time. I know I've been inboxing some of you, writing to you, just telling you, cut it short. Let me just have final comments from Colette Akwana, then Antonina, and then we'll wrap up with Wahome Ngare. And if Charles Kanjama is still online, I can still see his account. We can also have him give a final comment after Dr. Wahome, if he's around. Colette, please go ahead.
I think for me, Ernest, you've said it all in your part where you were introducing some of the activities that are ongoing. And I think for me, the only comment that I would have to give at this point is to really remind us that this is not necessarily a war that is being held in isolation to the communities, that we are surrounding ourselves with. We have a responsibility to our children, to the next generation, and there's really nothing to fear, because in as much as there's a lot that is probably being put out there, the law is clear. I know Kenyans, we have often had that word often, but the law is clear. We really have an anchor on what to do where the law is concerned, and it is supportive of what needs to be done. And part of the things that we are asking you to contribute towards in the 5 Ps that were mentioned really present the wider picture of how you can plug in. I don't think we can necessarily say that we have overspoken about the problem. I think it is always important to be reminded why this conversation is going on, but also to offer the solution of why it becomes important for us to do so. Let's remember that some of the revolutionary statements that are being made by persons in that community are really targeted at the fundamental rights and freedoms that we enjoy. And I don't want to belabor this. I think Kanjama mentioned it earlier. It's already happening in countries that you can see this thing is being propagated, and you're already seeing a lot of distraction on some of the core values. I think that people generally are there too, and that is being taken away. And while we have the opportunity to learn from some of those countries, ours is really to keep watch and to remind ourselves, professionally in our professional hats, spiritually with our spiritual hearts, mentally with our mental hearts, that we really have to pass on the baton to the next generation intact with some of the values that have already been upheld in the Constitution and in the Word of God. Thank you.
Thank you, Colette, and thank you for your very articulate and powerful summary. Antonina?
Thank you, Ernest. And we understand the time limitation, but truly grateful that we have gotten to be able to articulate some of the concerns and also some of the solutions that we can all plug into. my final comment is with regard to where we are at in end time prophecy. The Bible makes it very clear that when we see the realities of these things, we understand that we are in the end times. Therefore, what are we supposed to do? Jesus repeatedly used the word being vigilant. We must be alert. We must be vigilant. These things are being, pushed, like even right now, currently, when we are concerned with the Shakahola conversations, Maandamano conversations, it looks like it is quiet, but you can be sure that people that are pushing the sexual revolution ideology are working behind the scenes. They are looking who to bribe, what to change, how to configure. Like right now, don't even be surprised, they are part of this meeting. And they're looking at, okay, so Antonina is a firebrand. And Colette, okay, so what do we do with them? The reality of our life is that we are in warfare. We are in the end times. Jesus is coming back very soon, but this is the promise from the word of God. If you study the prophetic writings in the book of Daniel, it makes it clear that in the last days, the Antichrist will have nations that will support him and nations that will not support him. And guess what, my brothers and sisters? In Africa, particularly in the region we live in, we are part of the region of the South that Jesus actually described, and he talked about the Queen of the South. So that is our Queen, Queen of Sheba. We are the people, according to the book of Daniel, that will resist Antichrist ideologies. And therefore, my call is, let's show up. Let us band together. Let us go door to door. This week I've been going door to door in my Ziwani neighborhood. I'm from Ziwani, Kariako ward. I have gone and seen the former DC. I have seen the DO. I have talked to the Nyumba Kumi representatives. I have mobilized religious leaders in my neighborhood. Everyone can do something. Let us show up. We've been told that there is a march on the 13th. Please, my brothers and sisters, even with your children, show up. Please understand, this is not Maandamano. Of course, there are people who think this is Maandamano, people are going to throw souls. No, this is a march for family values. We are literally protected by the police as we walk across the city of Nairobi with our banners saying that we are here to promote family.
Amen.
And so show up and let us do this together. We can do it.
Thank you. Antonina reminding us that it's eschatological, it's not just cultural, it's not just political, it's not just a matter of law, it's not just legal. Apart from being spiritual, it is also eschatological. Thank you for that passionate shares, Antonina. Dr. Homengare, any parting shots before I hand over to Steve Kiteto? And as before what Dr. Homengare speaks, I just want to also encourage all of us, if you could please go to YouTube and look for NAYNET. NAYNET have got a YouTube page. You'll find ongoing conversations on this. NAYNET is N-A-Y-N-E-T. Please make time, go to YouTube, look for the NAYNET page, and you'll have more conversations on this. We just had a recently concluded conference of youth workers. I'm sure you'll be thoroughly blessed. Dr. Homengare, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Now, I just want to reiterate a few things that have already been mentioned. Now, first, remember that human beings existed before written law, and that written law is a derivative of what has been revealed to the human beings by God, so that written law would never be superior to the law of God. It is something we must keep in mind. The second thing is remember that a broken conscience can create immoral laws. So it is possible to legalize an immorality. You can legalize the killing of unborn babies, but that doesn't make it moral. Christians must see through this and be able to fight for what is right. Now, the other thing is that please let us avoid using their language. There is nothing that pains me as much as hearing a Christian saying homosexual marriage or gay marriage. It is a total misunderstanding of our faith. It is a total misunderstanding of what marriage is. You cannot have a marriage between people of the same sex. Marriage, by definition, is of people of the opposite sex. So let's not use their language. So to our brothers who are experiencing same-sex attraction and sisters, to our sisters and brothers who are experiencing rejection of their biological sex, I beg you to understand that you cannot define yourself by feelings. That is not the human way of doing things. We are not our feelings. We are far more superior than our feelings. And if our feelings are conflicting with reality, there is something that is wrong that needs to be addressed. The people who are encouraging you to believe you are normal and that you can justify what you're feeling and even live it out are very, very cruel people who are being paid a lot of money to perpetuate a lie. It is important that we understand this. Now, for the Christians, remember to separate those of our brothers and sisters who are experiencing these delusional problems from those who are perpetuating, so that we love our brothers and sisters who are going through these challenges. Let us not send them away. Let us not shun them. Let us continue to engage with them and encourage them to find healing. But those who are advocating for normalization or legalization of same-sex relationships, those we must fight with all we have. To my brothers in the medical field, it is medically unethical to give somebody drugs or to do surgery to try and convert a man to a woman. It is not ethical. It is not scientific, and we must guard against this in our practice. And finally, like all the others have said, come for the family symposium on the 12th at Sitam Valley Road, and let's meet on the 13th. And remember that just being a Christian, we are now confronted with what I would call Christ phobia. And there is also truth phobia. We are not homophobic. We are not scared of people who believe or feel attracted to people of the same sex. We want to love them and bring them to healing. But there is clearly Christ phobia in this generation. There is truth phobia, and we must not feel ashamed to stand with Christ or to stand with the truth, because that's what we are called to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Homengare. I can see our time is up, and there's one more question someone has written. We need to address the idea of children and teenagers in single-sex boarding schools contributing to same-sex attraction, and we can't address that here, but we will address that in the family symposium. So again, I ask you, please sign up for this family symposium that will be happening on the 12th of May next week on Friday. It's 2,000 shillings. Please sign up. All these discussions will be dealt with in a very extensive manner. And on that day, we won't have a short time like today. We will have, it's a whole day experience. It's a whole day experience. We'll have advocates, advocacy, people will advocate for this thing in a powerful way. You got David Wagata, Bettina Ross, Pastor Simon Bevy, Kathy Ogana, some of you know her. Please sign up for the family symposium and you'll get that information. I'm being told Charles Kanjama is still here with us. So Charles Kanjama, please share your closing remarks, and then we will close with Stephen Kiteto. I ask for us to just be patient for a few more minutes as Charles Kanjama closes up. Charles Kanjama, you're welcome. Charles Kanjama, are you there?
Yeah.
All right. If Charles Kanjama is not here, I'm just going to ask Kiteto. Kiteto, please close for us.
All right. Thank you very much, Anderson Boy. Very good job. Thank you for moderating today. Thank you, our panelists, for dedicating your time and engaging with us. Just to remind us, everybody has mentioned it, 12th of May, let's meet at Sitam Valley Road for the symposium. And the following day, we put our boots on the ground to march for the family and declare our stand. And I want to just finish with an encouragement from the Commander-in-Chief. He said, "And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." And Jesus telling his disciples, telling us today as well. So to walk with confidence that the gates of hell cannot overcome. I love the picture of David and the giant, and him saying, who's this uncircumcised Philistine? That is the attitude, but we have to show up. You can't say it when you're in the comfort of your house. You have to show up. How do you show up? Show up at the family march, show up for the symposium, and then the last but not least, beyond those two events, for us, we are looking at it with a long-term engagement of our culture. We want to take these conversations to where you are. The train of trainers that we mentioned is a KCPF organized, but using partners who are already implementing this. We want to add value to the already existing conversations and trainings on identity, sexuality, and just broadly speaking, culture, to get to where you are, your church or the sphere of influence. Call us. We have volunteered our time to come spend half a day to train people who work with your children, who work with youth, who work with parents, so that everybody is equipped. That's how we've chosen to show up. So we take the challenge, invite us, so that we're able to do this together and give you equipping so that we respond biblically and we respond in the right way. And so that our only response is not Leviticus says and Romans says, and it does say, but it has to be a more reasoned approach that comes with compassion and understanding, and in a way that will be effective to deal with the challenges of our time in this generation, in our culture. Thank you so much for spending time with us. This is just the beginning. Expect more from us, from KCPF Family Committee. I also want to mention that Colette, she didn't introduce herself, but she's my co-convener, and she's delivered very well. Thank you, Colette. Charles Kanjama, Dr. Wahome Ngare, Antonina, Ernest Omboy, Asanteni, and all of us who joined, and the team behind organizing this. See you again on 12th, and moving forward, you'll get to hear more from us. Good day. Right. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, the fellowship of the Holy Spirit, be with us now and forevermore. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.
Bye-bye. Thank you, good people. See you on the streets on
Amen.
Colette, thank you.